Moi Day 1990. This was the second Moi Day celebration after the inaugural one in 1989. Of course, it was a political day to celebrate Moi, but Moi, used this day to remind his political opponents who the real boss was. Koigi was on top of the list of Moi's sworn enemies. "We chose the path of peace," Moi said. "In maintaining that peace, each one of us has an obligation to behave responsibly." It was the call to action that the police officers were waiting for. That, when it's denied, they swung into action. A platoon, 40 officers, 4 combat land cruisers, armed to the tooth. They landed at Rogongo village, Bahati in Nakuru, at Wango Wamwere's home. Koigi's mother, Wango, Koigi's father, Wamwere, and Koigi's sister, Wahu, were all asleep. But they were rudely awakened by a boot that flung their door open. They were flogged from their beds and marched to the center of their compound. The headlights of the 4 police cars shone on them as they knelt and held their hands behind their backs. The officers ransacked through all the rooms, knocking everything down and tearing everything up. Not even the animals were spared. The cows bleated as the officers checked the troughs of the pen. They checked for the guns in the latrine, the meat store, and even in the dog's kennel. They found nothing. "Where have you hidden the guns?" they asked the elderly couple as they rained slaps on them. "You will produce the guns you have hidden for your treasonous sons," the officers threatened as they dragged the 3 to a part of the kitchen garden that was recently dug. "Is this where you have buried them? Dig up." The words sliced through the air, less a question than a relentless command. Trembling, the 3 fell to their knees, their hands clawing at the unforgiving earth. Desperation etched into their faces. They scrapped at the ground with frantic intensity, their nails cracking, their knuckles bleeding. Every movement was a testament to their growing despair, the raw soil quickly becoming smeared with the crimson of their efforts. The ground seemed to resist them, mocking their futile attempts as they barely scratched the surface, the weight of their dread growing heavier with each agonizing second. But still, no guns. The commanding officer grew more frustrated. After about 30 minutes of harassing Koigi's family, the officers decided to call it a night. "Do not leave any structure standing. Demolish everything," he gave an order to his officers. "Then go and arrest that courier brother of theirs." The officers drew 3 to the back of one land cruiser and drove them to a police cell where they spent the next 3 days. Courier, Koigi's brother, was seized by the authorities, accused of a baseless crime, and condemned to a 4-year sentence behind bars. The Koigi family home was reduced to rubble, and the maize barn, once brimming with dry maize and beans, was burned to the ground. As the officers raided the mother's homestead, Koigi was still locked somewhere in the basement of Nyayo House. You may call it delusion, instinct, or intelligence. But amongst the intelligence officers holding Koigi, there were some that believed that Koigi was indeed engineering a revolution. The evidence against Koigi was that he was the leader of the Kenya Patriotic Party, an underground movement that was working with other underground movements like Mwakenya and the February 18 movement. The intelligence officers believed that they would unearth more concrete evidence that would be their irrefutable evidence on the treason charges. This experience was the catalyst that caused Wango to move to Nairobi to lobby for her son's release. Wango did not have a definite plan when she got to Nairobi. All she knew was if it came to, then she would die for her son. For is it not dying for a child also the duty of motherhood? She was housed by friends and well-wishers who empathized with her situation. She had a son in jail, Kuria, and another son, Koigi, facing the trial of his life, treason. It was while in Nairobi that she started meeting people who would be useful in her cause. The first person she met was Terry Wanjiku Kariuki, the widow of former Nyandarua MP J.M. Kariuki. It was J.M.'s assassination back in 1975 that had led to, or rather accelerated, the inevitable first detention of Koigi by Kenyatta. Wango also met with Milka Wanjiru Kinodhia. She was the mother of Rumba Kinodhia and his brother Robert Kinodhia. The two had been imprisoned by Moi. Koigi's mother also reconnected with a family friend from Nakuru, Gladys Dito Kariuki. She was the mother of former Nakuru town MP, Mirugi Kariuki, another of Kenyatta and Moi's detainees. She was also introduced to Marianne Nyabola, mother to Titus Andugosi, the University of Nairobi student leader imprisoned after the 1982 coup. Although Marianne's son had already died due to torture in prison years earlier, she chose to join Koigi's mother to continue with the fight. In short, Koigi's mother was meeting with the mothers, wives, and friends of some of the 52 people that had been detained by Moi throughout the 80s on charges of treason and sedition. These heroines included Leah Wanjiru Mungai, Veronica Wamboi Ndutu, Ruth Wangari Dungu, Wahu Kara, Elizabeth Matejwa, Marcel Ojuka, Margaret Opiata, Joyce Wafula, Beldina Ojwang, Octavia Wahome, Ricarda Wahome, Rael Kitul, Rose Barasa, Phoebe Ongwen, Jerry Kabeberi, and many others. Monica Wango started to mobilize them to see what they could do to have their sons, husbands, and brothers released. The first people they met were the founders of Ford, a political party that had been formed in readiness for the 1992 general elections. She met with the leaders. She made a plea to them, but the leaders gave her what leaders give, promises. When we get to power, we shall have all your sons released, they promised. Unable to rely on those promises, she soldiered on. It was already January 1992, and the elections wouldn't be held until December. Wango couldn't bear the thought of having her sons incarcerated for that long. Then, one day, Terry Ann Kariuki asked Wango to accompany her to the hospital. She wanted to pay a visit to another woman who was undergoing a struggle of her own against the Moi's government. The woman they went to see was Wangari Maathai. Wangari Maathai, let me introduce her. Perhaps her greatest title is as the 2004 Nobel Peace Laureate. But it was her actions decades earlier that had made her win that coveted prize. But this is the reason why she was in hospital. See, in 1989, Moi had approved the design and the construction of a modern building known as the Kenya Times Complex. The trendy and magnificent 60-story glass-sheathed tower would be the biggest and most modern in Africa. The only problem was that its proposed construction site was the Uhuru Park Gardens. Through a relentless campaign, Wangari Maathai was able to stop the project on environmental grounds. This infuriated Moi and the Kanu regime. At one point, Moi told Madai that as a woman, she should learn to shut up and let the men talk.
Na mama moja anajitokeza na kwa desturi mama kwa Kiafrika lazima kuheshimu wanaume.
Then in January 1992, Madai was at it again. Acting on privileged intelligence, she and other members of FORD accused President Moi of orchestrating a government-sponsored coup to evade the scheduled elections later that year. Her bold claims led to her arrest, following a harrowing 3-day police siege outside her home. She was charged with spreading malicious rumors, sedition, and treason, the standard charges for all of Moi's political prisoners. During her month-long imprisonment, she endured relentless physical brutality. Upon her release on bail, she was so weakened that she couldn't walk home and had to be transported to the hospital by an ambulance. And that is why the two women had come to visit her at the hospital. But they waited until she was well to inform her of the real business that had brought them there. They said, "We have a list of 52 political prisoners. We saw you defeat Moi and the Uhuru Park monster. Teach us your ways, Wangari." "Okay, I will help you," Madai had said. "Let us meet on 28th of February. We shall go see the Attorney General and carry your beddings." Madai added. "Beddings?" Wango and Terian wondered. "Yes," Madai replied, "because we are not going home until our sons are released." So 28 came. It was on a Friday. Wangari, Wango, Terian, and several other mothers marched to the Attorney General's office. They presented their petition. "I will review your case." Amos Wako had said to dismiss them. "Okay," Madai replied. "We shall be waiting for our sons over there at the Uhuru Park." The women marched to Uhuru Park. There, they found many more women waiting for them. They erected a tent and lit 52 candles, hoping by the time that the candles burnt out, their sons would have been released. They sang hymns and shared their experiences. They spent the first night camping at Uhuru Park and named that part of the park the Freedom Corner. Saturday came. The media noticed the women camping. That made news for the day. Well-wishers started to join them. Some brought supplies. Others shared their sympathy, while more, especially relatives of the 52 men, joined the women in the camping. Sunday was a big day for the women. They held a church sermon on the open ground and sang songs of solidarity. These heightened their optimism. They hoped that Monday would be their day to celebrate the release of their sons. Monday was the day that the women hoped would be their last at Uhuru Park camp. But as they found out, Moi's heart had been hardened. Like Pharaoh, Moi needed at least 10 pestilences to let the 52 go. So Monday came and went, without even a word from the government. The women felt dejected, but they kept the faith. However, Tuesday came. The government sent a message to the women. Not necessarily the message they were hoping for. It was the police. Not the regular police, but hardened anti-riot police. They came armed with anti-riot gear, knee-pads, bulletproof vests, batons, shields, and tear gas canisters. Wangari Maathai rose to meet them. "How can we help you, our sons?" But the anti-riot police didn't come to talk. The commander leading the police swung his clenched fist towards Madai's face. The fist connected with her right cheek. She was knocked out immediately. This is her actual photo that day. She had to be carried to the hospital. It was a vicious uppercut. The officers then descended on the other women, clobbering them, knocking down the candles and hymn books, tearing the tent, opening the tear gas canisters on their faces. That is when the chaos ensued. Everyone was running. The police were chasing. The mothers were screaming and wailing. Tear gas smoke engulfed the city. The women realized what they had become. Helpless. But what happened next was unexpected and unprecedented in the post-colonial era. Elderly mothers, unable to run anymore, stood on their feet and refused to move. They persevered the tear gas that was corroding their eyes. They persevered the insults that the police were hurling at them. Yet, what they were about to do, no mother does unless she has been pushed against the wall, and this is her last resolve. The mothers who were standing removed the undergarments that they were wearing. Then they lifted their skirts above their heads. They bore the shame of their nakedness as they wailed. The mothers who were too numb to stand remained on their knees. They pulled the sleeves of their blouses from their hands and let the top garments fall from their top. They removed their bras and then lifted their hands as they continued wailing. The world saw their nakedness. But unashamedly, the police hurled them to the back of their trucks, still naked. The mothers were driven to various police stations within Nairobi and locked for the night. Uhuru Park was cordoned off. In the 4 hours of chaos that Tuesday afternoon, the park had become a crime scene. But at least the seeds of freedom had been sown, watered by the tears and blood of our mothers. Wangu Wamwere's resistance would still bloom someday. The mothers were held for 3 days and later released, but their sons were still locked up. Wangu's house became the headquarters for the released political prisoners movement. She managed to hold meetings with different women at different times as they planned their comeback. Moi, with his heart still hardened, refused to nudge. He claimed that he didn't know what was happening.
I don't regard it as a political prisoner.
After a week or so, Wango gathered the women in her house and gave them the next course of action. "We are not giving up now," she said. "We are not going home yet. Tomorrow we march to the All Saints Cathedral." That was in March of 1992. Wango had arranged with the provost of the cathedral, Jenga, and was granted permission to use the sanctuary. When they arrived at the cathedral grounds, Wango announced to the world their next move. "We shall not eat until we see our sons. We are going on a hunger strike." With that, they found their way into the bunker at the church, locked themselves in, and started their hunger strike. This started attracting international press and human rights watchdogs. But Moi did not budge.
If you win, will you release the last 7 political prisoners?
There's no who are the political prisoners? Would you tell me?
KOIGI PT.4 I.
If he committed crime, which is not political, it's not political, I don't regard it as a political prisoner.
Will you stop torture in Nyayo House? There was a political prisoner who was released 2
Who
weeks
told
ago who's been
you
tortured.
we tortured somebody? Have you gone to Nyayo House yourself?
but we interviewed somebody who's
Or
who was
what
released
you-
2
or
weeks
what-
ago who was tortured last year.
Oh, it is what you are being told, my gracious lady.
Later that month, the mothers went to a court hearing, hoping that their sons would be set free. They were chained to one another, forming a long procession as they made their way to court. The clinging of the chains as they walked and the pain on their faces as they talked told the world a story of motherly bravery that had never been witnessed anywhere before. The weight of the chains strained their weak bodies as the hunger strike was taking a toll on them. But for their sons, they persevered. But the judges dismissed the application to release the sons. The emotional agony the mothers endured far surpassed their physical suffering. With tears streaming down their faces, they watched helplessly as their sons were bundled back to their holding cells. Every day, the mothers camped at the church. They survived only on water and biscuits, and the prayers of the many supporters who passed by the church. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Still, Moi and his regime did not budge. However, as the hunger strike became a permanent item on the daily bulletins, the advisors around Moi prevailed upon him to appease the women. That is when, in June 1992, 4 months after the hunger strike, Moi released 4 of the prisoners. Charles Kuria, Koigi's brother, was among those released. Although it made the mothers happy, they still refused to call off the hunger strike. They went on, knowing that the hardened heart of Moi was starting to thaw. Maybe he will release more. But the elections of 1992 were fast approaching. Attention turned to the campaigns and the wheeler dealing that occupied the country. People and the press forgot about the women. Still, the women went on with their hunger strike. Minutes, hours, days, weeks, and months crawled slowly at the All Saints Cathedral. It is hard to point out what kept the women strong, because as it seemed, they had decided to die rather than return home empty. Then elections came in December. Moi won. Everybody lost hope. January 1993 came, 11 months since the mother started the activism. Then, on 19th of January, the remainder of the prisoners were released. It was a big sigh of relief to the mothers. Their mourning had been turned into a celebration. But to Moi, the release of Koigi left a bitter aftertaste. Although the Cold War had long been forgotten, Moi still felt that Koigi was a communist ideologist. Moi wanted to rule for many decades, for KANU, his party, to rule for at least 100 years, until 2063. But this could not be if Koigi was still roaming free and alive. So, to cut the long story short, Koigi's freedom would only last for 7 months. The son of fate was arrested again, this time charged with armed robbery. Him, his brother, and 2 others had allegedly violently robbed guns from a police station in Bahati. If indeed this time the police could prove his guilt, then Koigi could be dealt a life sentence. But through the spirited fighting of his lawyers, he was jailed for 4 years with 6 strokes of the cane. This is Koigi's mother after the sentencing.
mĩaka 50 nĩ matũraga marĩ ohe na magacoka Ngai thĩ makoimĩra gĩtũmi tondũ Ngai arĩ kĩrĩa merĩire. Ndahoya ũguo ndĩ mbere yaku Baba, ndũkanetĩkĩre tũthekererwo nĩ thũ kana tũconoke kana tũkue.
A few years later, Koigi fell sick with a heart condition. Monica Wango would again stage a sit-in at the hospital's corridor, highlighting the plight of her dying son. And like the last time, she prevailed. Koigi was released on medical grounds. This time, not to be arrested again.
Finally, the government accepted to release me on bond for me to go for treatment abroad.
We are happy to be very happy. It's true that he is free, and this is what we have been waiting for.
To say that she and her family lived happily ever after would be a misrepresentation. She lived every day with the scars of the liberation movement. We all enjoy the fruits of the seeds that she watered with her blood. She passed on October 27, 2003, aged 93. Koigi said this of his mother: "Having missed our earthly heaven, we shall not miss the heavenly one." Today, Koigi leads a quiet life in Nakuru, surrounded by his family. Often, he posts his thoughts about justice as he spectates on the current situation of our country. I wonder what he thinks about the current Gen Z uprising. Thank you so much for being with us throughout this journey. If you've not watched part 1 and part 2, kindly do so, as they all lead to the ending of this part 3. If you've not yet subscribed to this channel, kindly do so. Also, like, share with your friends, and leave a comment about what else you'd like us to tackle. Your views are our motivation to carry on. As always, this has been yours, Jeph Kafka.